The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan General Hospital's emergency room buzzed overhead as Simone Johnson checked the medication chart for the third time. Something wasn't right. The dosage Dr. Nathan Pierce had ordered for the elderly patient in bed 7 was dangerously high, nearly double what the standard protocol recommended. Simone had been a nurse for 5 years, and she'd never seen anything like this. She walked quickly to where Dr. Pierce stood at the nurse's station, surrounded by 2 residents who hung on his every word. He was a tall, silver-haired man in his mid-50s, known throughout the hospital for his surgical skills and his terrible temper. Most nurses avoided questioning him, but Simone couldn't stay silent when a patient's safety was at risk. "Dr. Pierce," she said politely, holding up the chart. "I need to clarify the morphine dosage for Mr. Patterson in bed 7. The amount you've ordered is..." "Are you questioning my judgment, Nurse Johnson?" Dr. Pierce interrupted, his voice cold and sharp. The resident stepped back slightly, sensing trouble. "I'm just concerned about patient safety," Simone replied, keeping her voice steady. "This dosage is significantly higher than protocol suggests, and given Mr. Patterson's age and kidney function." "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, Dr. Pierce snapped, turning to face her fully. "I don't need some nurse telling me how to do my job. With respect, doctor, it's my responsibility to verify orders that fall outside standard parameters," Simone said, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. Around them, other nurses and staff members began to notice the confrontation, conversations dying down as people turned to watch. Dr. Pierce's face turned red. He took a step toward Simone, his jaw clenched. "You will administer the medication as ordered, or I'll have you written up for insubordination." "I can't in good conscience give a patient a potentially lethal dose," Simone said quietly but clearly. "I'm asking you to review the order, or I'll need to consult with the pharmacy and the nursing supervisor." What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Dr. Pierce raised his hand and slapped Simone hard across her left cheek. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent emergency room like a gunshot. Simone's head snapped to the side, and she stumbled backward, catching herself against the counter. Her cheek burned, and tears sprang to her eyes, though she fought to hold them back. "You're suspended," Dr. Pierce hissed. "Effective immediately. Get out of my emergency room." Simone stood frozen, her hand pressed to her stinging cheek. Around her, at least 15 staff members had witnessed the assault. Some gasped, others stood with their mouths open in shock. Nobody moved to help her. Nobody spoke up. The fear of Dr. Pierce's reputation and influence held everyone paralyzed. Simone's mind raced. She could reveal who she really was, could mention that her late father's foundation had donated $50 million to build the hospital's newest wing, that her family name was on the building they stood in. But she'd worked so hard to be respected for her skills, not her family's money. She'd kept her connection to the Johnson Foundation private, wanting to earn her place in nursing through merit alone. With as much dignity as she could gather, Simone removed her stethoscope and placed it on the counter. She held her head high, refusing to let Dr. Pierce see her cry. As she walked toward the staff exit, she heard whispers beginning to ripple through the room. She didn't look back. In the locker room, Simone finally let the tears fall. Her hands shook as she gathered her belongings. The humiliation burned worse than the physical pain. She'd done the right thing, tried to protect a patient, and been assaulted for it. As she left the hospital through the back entrance, she had no idea that this terrible moment would set in motion a series of events that would change not just her life, but the entire culture of Metropolitan General Hospital. Have you ever stood up for what was right, only to be punished for it? If this story resonates with you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps stories like Simone's reach others who need to hear them. Simone drove home on autopilot, her mind replaying the slap over and over. Her modest apartment in the city's arts district was a far cry from the mansion where she'd grown up, but she preferred it that way. After her father passed away 3 years ago, leaving behind his pharmaceutical fortune and foundation, Simone had chosen to live simply. She wanted to understand the world her patients lived in, not hide behind wealth and privilege. She dropped her keys on the kitchen counter and caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. A red mark blazed across her left cheek in the perfect shape of a handprint. The sight made her stomach turn. She grabbed her phone and scrolled to her brother's number. Andre picked up on the second ring. "Simone, what's wrong?" Her older brother could always tell when something was bothering her. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice cracking. As she recounted the incident, she could hear Andre's breathing getting heavier, more agitated. "That son of a..." Andre stopped himself. "I'm calling our lawyer right now. I'm calling the hospital board. Hell, I'm calling the police. This is assault, Simone. That man put his hands on you." "Andre, wait," Simone said, sitting down on her sofa. "I need to think about this." "Think about what?" "He hit you in front of witnesses. He needs to be arrested." "I know, and he will face consequences," Simone said slowly. "But I want to handle this the right way. I don't want people to think I'm using our family name to get revenge. I want the system to work the way it should work for any nurse who gets assaulted." Andre was quiet for a moment. "You're stronger than me, little sis. If someone had hit me, I'd already be in the car heading to that hospital. But I respect what you're saying. Just promise me, if the hospital doesn't handle this properly, you'll let me step in." "I promise," Simone agreed. "Give me a few days to see how they respond." After hanging up, Simone made herself tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights come on as evening fell. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from her colleagues at the hospital. Word was spreading fast. Several nurses had already filed witness statements with Human Resources. Others sent messages of support, apologizing for not speaking up in the moment. One text stood out, from her friend Rachel, a nurse practitioner in the pediatric ward. "Everyone is talking about what happened. Dr. Pierce went back to the patient after you left and reviewed the order. He changed it to exactly what you suggested. He knew you were right, Simone. He hit you because you were right, and he couldn't handle it." Simone felt a surge of anger mixed with vindication. Mr. Patterson was safe, at least. Her willingness to speak up had protected a patient, even though it had cost her everything. She thought about all the other nurses who'd probably faced similar situations with Dr. Pierce over the years, too afraid to report him because of his status and connections. The next morning, Simone woke to her phone ringing. The caller ID showed Metropolitan General Hospital's main number. She let it go to voicemail, not ready to talk to anyone from administration yet. When she listened to the message, it was from Human Resources, asking her to call back regarding an urgent matter. Simone made coffee and took her time getting ready. When she finally returned the call, she was told that an investigation had been opened into the incident and that Dr. Pierce had been placed on temporary administrative leave. They asked if she would be willing to give a formal statement. She agreed and scheduled a meeting for the following day. That afternoon, another call came, this time from a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Johnson, my name is Julian Matthews. I'm the hospital administrator at Metropolitan General. I'd like to speak with you in person about what happened yesterday, if you're willing. I understand if you'd prefer to communicate through a lawyer, but I'm hoping we can talk face to face." Simone hesitated. Something in his voice sounded genuine, not like the typical corporate damage control she'd expected. "When did you want to meet? Would today work? I could come to you, wherever you're comfortable," Julian offered. "Tomorrow," Simone said. "My apartment. I'll text you the address." She wanted one more day to compose herself, to be sure she could handle this conversation with professionalism and clarity. As she ended the call, Simone realized she was nervous. This Julian Matthews would be the first person from the hospital's leadership to hear her side of the story. She hoped he would truly listen, but she'd been disappointed by people in power before. Tomorrow would tell her everything she needed to know about whether Metropolitan General Hospital was worth fighting for or if it was time to walk away for good. Julian Matthews had barely slept since learning about the incident in the emergency room. As the newly appointed hospital administrator, he'd taken the position 6 months ago with a clear mission: transform Metropolitan General's culture from one of hierarchy and intimidation to one of safety and respect. The assault on Simone Johnson represented everything he was trying to change. He spent the morning reviewing witness statements. 15 people had seen Dr. Pierce slap the nurse. 15 people had watched it happen, and not one had intervened in the moment. The statements painted a consistent picture. Nurse Johnson had politely questioned a medication order, Dr. Pierce had become aggressive, and when she'd stood her ground, he'd struck her. Julian's assistant, Patricia, knocked on his office door. "I have the file you requested on Nurse Johnson," she said, handing him a folder. "And Julian, there's something else you should know. I did some digging into our donor records." Julian opened the folder and began reading Simone's employment history. 5 years at Metropolitan General, consistently excellent performance reviews, 3 commendations for patient advocacy, 0 disciplinary actions. She'd graduated with honors from nursing school and had turned down positions at more prestigious hospitals to work at Metropolitan General specifically. "What did you find in the donor records?" Julian asked, looking up at Patricia. "Simone Johnson is Theodore Johnson's daughter," Patricia said quietly. "The Theodore Johnson. The Johnson Foundation donated $50 million for our new cardiac wing 3 years ago. It was the single largest donation in the hospital's history." Julian felt his stomach drop. "She's been working here for 5 years, and nobody knew. She specifically requested that her connection to the foundation remain private," Patricia explained. "Her father respected her wishes. Only the former CEO and the foundation's board knew, and they kept it confidential. She wanted to build her career on her own merit." Julian leaned back in his chair, processing this information. The situation was even worse than he'd realized. Not only had a staff member been assaulted, but the hospital had assaulted the daughter of their most generous benefactor, a woman who'd chosen to work humbly among them rather than leverage her family's influence. "What do you know about Dr. Pierce's history?" Julian asked. Patricia pulled out another file, much thicker than Simone's. 17 complaints over the past 8 years. Verbal abuse, intimidation, throwing surgical instruments in the operating room. 3 formal grievances that were settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. He's brilliant in the operating room, and he brings in significant revenue, so previous administration looked the other way. "That ends now," Julian said firmly. "Schedule interviews with every staff member who witnessed the assault. I want to talk to them personally. And get me everything we have on our workplace violence policies. We're going to need to make some serious changes." Over the next several hours, Julian interviewed nurses, residents, and the physician assistant who'd been present during the incident. Their accounts were remarkably consistent. Several people mentioned that this wasn't the first time Dr. Pierce had been aggressive with staff, just the first time it had gotten physical. The culture of fear around him ran deep. One nurse, an older woman named Carol who'd worked at the hospital for 20 years, broke down in tears during her interview. "I should have said something," she told Julian. "I should have stepped in, should have stood up for Simone. But I was afraid. I have a mortgage, kids in college. Dr. Pierce has gotten nurses fired before for crossing him. I'm ashamed of myself." "This isn't your fault," Julian assured her. "The system failed. We created an environment where speaking up felt impossible. That's what we're going to change." By the end of the day, Julian had a complete picture of what had happened and why. He also had a clear understanding of the broader problem. Dr. Pierce was a symptom of a toxic culture that prioritized revenue and reputation over staff safety and patient care. Fixing this would require more than just dealing with one doctor. It would require transforming the entire institution. That evening, Julian prepared for his meeting with Simone the next day. He reviewed his notes, thought carefully about what to say. This wasn't just about legal liability or public relations. A talented, dedicated nurse had been assaulted while trying to protect a patient. She deserved more than corporate apologies and settlements. She deserved real change, real accountability. Julian looked at Simone's employee photo clipped to her file. She had warm brown eyes and a genuine smile, the kind of smile that probably comforted scared patients every day. Tomorrow, he would meet her in person and do whatever it took to make this right. He just hoped she would give him the chance. If you've ever witnessed injustice and wished someone in power would actually do something about it, this next part is for you. Subscribe to see how Julian's investigation leads to real change, and share your experiences in the comments. Simone's apartment was filled with afternoon sunlight when Julian arrived exactly on time. She'd spent the morning cleaning nervously, then felt silly for worrying about what a hospital administrator would think of her home. When she opened the door, she was surprised by what she saw. Julian Matthews was younger than she'd expected, probably in his mid-30s, with kind brown eyes and an earnest expression. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks, no suit jacket or tie. He held a folder under one arm and extended his other hand to shake hers. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he said. His handshake was firm but gentle, and his gaze went immediately to the fading bruise on her cheek. His expression tightened with what looked like genuine anger on her behalf. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you. There's no excuse for it." Simone led him to her living room and offered coffee, which he accepted gratefully. As she poured 2 cups in the kitchen, she studied him through the doorway. He looked around her apartment with interest but not judgment, his eyes lingering on the framed photos of her with patients and colleagues. "Your apartment is lovely," Julian said when she returned with the coffee. "Thank you for letting me into your space. I know this situation has been traumatic, and I don't want to make it worse." They sat across from each other, and Julian opened his folder. "I've spent the past day and a half investigating what happened. I've interviewed 15 witnesses, reviewed Dr. Pierce's employment history, and examined our workplace violence policies. What I found is deeply troubling." For the next 30 minutes, Julian walked Simone through his findings. He didn't minimize anything or make excuses. He acknowledged the hospital's failures, the complaints that had been ignored, the culture of intimidation that had been allowed to fester. Simone found herself relaxing slightly as she listened. This wasn't the defensive, dismissive response she'd expected from administration. "I also learned about your father's connection to the hospital," Julian said gently. "I want you to know that changes nothing about how seriously we're taking this. You deserve justice and accountability regardless of who your father was. But I have to admit, knowing that you've worked here for 5 years without ever using your family name or asking for special treatment, that tells me everything I need to know about your character." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. "I just wanted to be a nurse," she said softly. "I didn't want people treating me differently because of my last name." "That's admirable," Julian said. "And it makes what happened to you even more egregious. You came here to serve patients and ended up being assaulted for doing your job correctly." He pulled out a document. "The hospital board met this morning. Dr. Pierce has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. We expect that investigation to result in termination. We're also implementing immediate policy changes regarding workplace violence and staff safety. But more importantly, I want to know what you need. What would make this right, as much as anything can?" Simone hadn't expected this question. She'd anticipated legal maneuvering, settlement offers designed to silence her. Instead, Julian was asking what she actually wanted. "I want to come back to work," she said slowly. "I love being a nurse. I love working with patients. But I want to know that if something like this happens again, to me or to anyone else, that the hospital will actually protect its staff." "You have my word," Julian said. "And I'd like to offer you something beyond just reinstatement. We're creating a patient safety committee, and I'd like you to be part of it. You'd work with nursing leadership and administration to develop protocols that empower nurses to speak up about safety concerns without fear of retaliation. You'd keep your clinical hours, but you'd also have a voice in shaping hospital policy." Simone blinked in surprise. "You want me to help change hospital policy?" "I want you to help change hospital culture," Julian corrected. "You did exactly what every nurse should do when you questioned that medication order. You put the patient first, even when it cost you. That's the kind of nursing we need to encourage and protect, not punish." "I'd like that," Simone said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I accept your offer. Thank you." They spent another hour discussing the details. Julian also offered back pay for the days she'd been suspended, a formal apology from the hospital board, and compensation for her medical expenses and emotional distress. Simone accepted everything gratefully, recognizing that these weren't just empty gestures but genuine attempts to make amends. As Julian prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Can I ask you something personal? When Simone nodded, he continued. Why did you choose nursing? With your resources, you could have done anything. Simone smiled, the first real smile she'd managed in days. My mother died when I was 12. She had cancer. The nurses who cared for her in her final days, they were amazing. They treated her with such dignity and kindness. They took care of me too, explained things in ways I could understand, made sure I got to say goodbye properly. I wanted to be that person for someone else. I wanted to matter in that way. Julian's eyes grew suspiciously bright. My mother died of medical negligence, he said quietly. A preventable medication error that nobody caught. That's why I got into hospital administration. I wanted to make sure other families didn't go through what mine did. They stood there for a moment, two people bound by loss and a shared desire to make healthcare better. Something passed between them, a connection that went beyond professional courtesy. Simone felt it, and judging by the way Julian hesitated before saying goodbye, he felt it too. After he left, Simone sat on her sofa, her coffee now cold, and thought about the meeting. She'd come in expecting a battle and instead found an ally. Maybe even more than an ally. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. This was professional, nothing more. But as she got ready for bed that night, she couldn't stop thinking about Julian's kind eyes and genuine concern. For the first time since the assault, she felt hopeful about the future. Simone's first day back at Metropolitan General Hospital felt surreal. She arrived early, before the morning shift change, and stood in the parking lot for a moment, gathering her courage. The building looked the same, but everything felt different. She was different. The moment she walked through the staff entrance, Rachel spotted her and rushed over, pulling her into a tight hug. "We've missed you so much," Rachel said. "Are you really okay?" "I'm getting there," Simone replied honestly. As she made her way to the locker room, nurses and staff members stopped to greet her. Some hugged her, others just touched her arm or shoulder in solidarity. The support was overwhelming and healing. In the locker room, she found a card taped to her locker, signed by nearly 40 staff members, welcoming her back and expressing their support. Dr. Pierce's suspension had sent ripples through the entire hospital. According to the whispers Simone heard, he'd been escorted out by security and told not to return to the premises. The hospital had made a statement about zero tolerance for workplace violence. Several other doctors who'd been known for aggressive behavior had suddenly become much more polite to nursing staff. Simone's first shift back was in the medical surgical unit rather than the emergency room. Julian had arranged for her to have a gentler transition, working with stable patients while she readjusted. But he'd also scheduled her first patient safety committee meeting for the following week. Around mid-morning, Julian appeared on the floor, making rounds to check in with different departments. When he saw Simone at the nurses' station, his face lit up with a genuine smile. "Welcome back," he said. "How's your first day going?" "Better than I expected," Simone admitted. They talked for a few minutes about her schedule and the upcoming committee meeting. Other staff members noticed the interaction, and Simone caught several curious glances. Julian's attention wasn't unwelcome, but it was definitely noticed. Over the next few weeks, Simone settled into her new routine. She worked 3 12-hour shifts on the medical surgical floor, then spent 2 days a week working with the patient safety committee. Julian had assembled a diverse group: experienced nurses, young residents, physician assistants, and patient advocates. Together, they were developing new protocols for reporting safety concerns, protecting staff from retaliation, and creating a culture where speaking up was encouraged rather than punished. Simone discovered she had a talent for policy work. She could see gaps in procedures that administration missed, could articulate the concerns of frontline staff in ways that hospital leadership understood. Julian often sought her input on decisions, and their working relationship grew stronger with each meeting. One afternoon, after a particularly productive committee session, Julian asked if Simone would join him for coffee. They walked to a cafe near the hospital, and their conversation flowed from work topics to personal ones. Julian told her about his background, how he'd worked his way up from a patient services representative to hospital administration. He'd gotten his MBA while working full-time, driven by his determination to prevent the kind of tragedy his family had experienced. "I don't just want to run a hospital," Julian said, stirring his coffee. "I want to transform how healthcare works. I want patients to be safe, staff to be respected, and everyone to go home better than they came in." "That's a beautiful vision," Simone said. "It's rare to find someone in administration who really cares about the people, not just the budget." "The budget matters," Julian admitted with a rueful smile. "But if we're not taking care of our patients and staff, what's the point? A hospital that protects its revenue but harms its people isn't a hospital. It's just a business." As they walked back to the hospital, Simone felt a growing warmth toward Julian. He was intelligent, compassionate, and genuinely committed to making things better. He also made her laugh with his self-deprecating humor about learning medical terminology and accidentally insulting a surgeon by using the wrong Latin phrase for a procedure. Inside the hospital lobby, Julian hesitated before heading back to his office. "Simone, I really appreciate working with you," he said. "Not just because you're good at policy work, though you are, but because you remind me why I do this job. You care about the right things." "So do you," Simone replied, feeling her cheeks warm. They stood there for a moment, and Simone sensed Julian wanted to say something else. But instead, he just smiled and headed toward the administrative wing. As Simone returned to her floor, she realized she'd been hoping he would say more. The thought surprised her. She'd been so focused on healing and rebuilding her career that she hadn't considered opening her heart to anyone. But Julian was different. He understood her in ways most people didn't. That evening, Simone called Andre to update him on how things were going. "The hospital is really making changes," she told her brother. "New policies, training programs, even a whistleblower hotline for staff to report concerns anonymously." "And this Julian guy?" Andre asked. "He's the one making all this happen?" "He's leading it, yeah," Simone said, trying to keep her voice neutral. Andre laughed. "You like him?" "It's professional," Simone protested. "Sis, I can hear it in your voice. And honestly, after everything you've been through, you deserve someone who treats you right. If this guy is as good as you say, maybe give him a chance." After hanging up, Simone thought about her brother's words. Maybe Andre was right. Maybe it was time to let someone in. For now, though, she was content to take things slowly, to let whatever was developing between her and Julian unfold naturally. She had a feeling that the best was yet to come. The Patient Safety Committee's work was gaining attention throughout the hospital. After 2 months, they'd implemented a new reporting system that had already caught 3 potential medication errors and 2 equipment malfunctions. Staff surveys showed that nurses felt more empowered to speak up about concerns. Julian presented these results at a board meeting, giving Simone full credit for many of the improvements. Simone and Julian had fallen into a comfortable pattern of working together during the day and occasionally meeting for coffee or lunch to discuss ideas. Their conversations grew more personal with each meeting. Julian told Simone about his childhood in foster care, how he'd aged out of the system at 18 with nothing but determination and a dream of making something of himself. Simone shared stories about her father, how he'd built his pharmaceutical company from scratch and taught her that wealth meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. One rainy Thursday evening, they were working late in Julian's office, finalizing a presentation for the board about expanding the safety program to other departments. Simone had changed out of her scrubs into jeans and a soft blue sweater. She sat cross-legged in the chair across from Julian's desk, making notes on her tablet. "I think we should add a section about the cost savings," Julian said, scrolling through data on his laptop. "The board loves safety and patient care, but they really love numbers that show we're reducing liability and improving efficiency. It feels cynical to frame patient safety in terms of money," Simone said, wrinkling her nose. "It is cynical," Julian agreed. "But it's also strategic. If we can show that doing the right thing also makes financial sense, we're more likely to get buy-in for bigger changes." They worked for another hour, perfecting the slides and rehearsing key points. When they finally finished, Julian leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "I don't know about you, but I'm starving. Want to grab dinner?" Simone glanced at the clock. It was nearly 8. "Sure, why not?" They walked to a small Italian restaurant a few blocks from the hospital, finding a quiet table in the back. Over pasta and wine, their conversation drifted away from work entirely. Julian asked about Simone's interests outside nursing, and she told him about her love of photography, how she'd walk through different neighborhoods on her days off, capturing moments of everyday beauty. "I'd love to see your work sometime," Julian said. "I bet you have a great eye for it." "Maybe," Simone said, feeling unexpectedly shy. "What do you do when you're not thinking about hospital administration?" Julian laughed. "Honestly, I don't have much of a life outside work. But I used to play basketball. I was pretty good in high school, even got a scholarship offer, but I needed to work instead. I still shoot hoops at the gym sometimes, though I'm not as quick as I used to be." "I'd like to see that," Simone said. "Maybe we could play sometime. I'm terrible at basketball, but I'm competitive." "That sounds like a date," Julian said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, if you'd want it to be. A date, that is. Or just friends playing basketball. Either is fine. I'm going to stop talking now." Simone felt her heart skip. Julian looked genuinely nervous, and she found it endearing. "I'd like it to be a date," she said softly. Julian's face broke into a wide smile. "Really? Because I've been wanting to ask you out for weeks, but I didn't want to make things awkward at work, or make you feel like there was any pressure." "Julian," Simone interrupted gently. "I like you too. I have for a while now." They stayed at the restaurant until closing, talking about everything and nothing. Julian told her about his mother, how she'd been a teacher who always put others first, how her death had shattered his world but also given him purpose. Simone opened up about the grief of losing her father, how she still found herself reaching for the phone to call him when something good or bad happened. When Julian walked Simone to her car, he hesitated before saying goodbye. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Simone answered by stepping closer and tilting her face up to his. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I've wanted to do that for a very long time," Julian admitted. "Me too," Simone said. Over the following weeks, they officially began dating. Julian took Simone to art galleries and concerts. Simone showed Julian her favorite photography spots around the city. They were careful to maintain professionalism at the hospital, but their colleagues noticed the change anyway. The whispers were kind, though. People seemed genuinely happy to see them together. Andre came to visit one weekend and insisted on meeting Julian properly. They met for brunch, and Simone watched anxiously as her protective older brother sized up her new boyfriend. But Andre was won over by Julian's sincerity and his obvious affection for Simone. "He's good for you," Andre told Simone later. "And he clearly adores you. Dad would have liked him." That thought made Simone tear up. Her father would have liked Julian. He would have respected his work ethic, his integrity, his commitment to making healthcare better. She felt a bittersweet mix of happiness and sadness, wishing her father could have met the man she was falling in love with. As winter turned to spring, Simone found herself happier than she'd been in years. The trauma of what had happened with Dr. Pierce was beginning to heal, replaced by the satisfaction of meaningful work and the joy of a deepening relationship. Julian had helped her see that. Sometimes the worst moments in life could lead to unexpected blessings. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. The hospital board meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. Julian had asked Simone to attend to present the Patient Safety Committee's 6-month report. She was nervous but prepared, having rehearsed her presentation multiple times. The boardroom was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a long mahogany table surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. 12 board members filed in, along with several hospital executives. Julian gave Simone an encouraging smile from his seat near the head of the table. Simone's presentation went smoothly. She outlined the improvements in reporting, the reduction in preventable errors, and the measurable increase in staff satisfaction. The board members asked thoughtful questions, and Simone answered confidently, supporting her points with data and specific examples. After she finished, the board chair, an elegant woman in her 60s named Helen Rodriguez, stood up. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Your work has been exceptional. Before we move on, I need to address another matter that this board has been discussing in executive session. Simone glanced at Julian, who looked as confused as she felt. We have completed our investigation into the assault on Ms. Johnson by Dr. Nathan Pierce, Helen continued. The findings are clear and disturbing. Dr. Pierce had a pattern of aggressive and abusive behavior toward staff that was documented but never properly addressed. The board has voted unanimously to terminate his employment, effective immediately. He will not be eligible for rehire at any facility in our hospital network. There were nods around the table. Helen continued, furthermore, we have reviewed the complaints settled with non-disclosure agreements in the past. We're voiding those agreements and offering financial compensation to the affected parties. What happened to Ms. Johnson should never have been possible, and we take full responsibility for the failures in our system. Simone felt tears prick her eyes. This was real accountability, not just performative gestures. There's one more thing, Helen said, looking directly at Simone. The board would like to offer you a permanent position as Director of Patient Safety and Nursing Advocacy. This would be a full-time administrative role with the authority to investigate concerns, implement changes, and report directly to this board. We believe you're the right person to ensure what happened to you never happens to anyone else in our hospital system. Simone was speechless. She looked at Julian, who was beaming with pride. This was a massive opportunity, a chance to create lasting change. But it would also mean leaving bedside nursing, at least partially. Can I have some time to think about it? Simone asked. Of course, Helen said. Take a week. We know it's a big decision. After the meeting, Julian caught up with Simone in the hallway. That was incredible. You were incredible. I don't know what to say, Simone admitted. It's everything I could want, but I'd miss working directly with patients. The position would include clinical hours, Julian said. Helen and I discussed it. You'd spend 2 days a week in administration and 1 day maintaining your nursing practice. Best of both worlds. That evening, Simone and Julian went to dinner to celebrate. Over wine and celebration, they talked about the opportunity and what it would mean. Julian was careful not to pressure her, but his excitement was obvious. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you, Julian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. You've transformed this hospital in 6 months. Imagine what you could do with real authority and resources. Simone squeezed his hand. I'm leaning toward yes. I just need to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons, not because I'm still trying to prove something about that night with Dr. Pierce. You've already proven everything, Julian said softly. You were right, he was wrong, and justice has been served. This is about your future, not your past. A few days later, Simone called Helen Rodriguez and accepted the position. The hospital announced her appointment with a press release highlighting her qualifications and vision for patient safety. Several news outlets picked up the story, focusing on how a nurse who'd been assaulted for speaking up was now in charge of protecting other healthcare workers. The response was overwhelming. Nurses from other hospitals reached out, sharing their own stories and asking for advice. Patient advocacy groups praised Metropolitan General's commitment to change. Simone found herself giving interviews and speaking at nursing conferences about creating cultures of safety. Through it all, Julian was her steadfast supporter. He celebrated her victories, listened when she vented about frustrations, and reminded her to take care of herself when she got too caught up in work. Their relationship deepened as they navigated this new phase together. One evening, as they walked through the park near Simone's apartment, Julian stopped at a bench and pulled her down to sit beside him. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice serious. Simone's heart raced. Okay. I'm in love with you, Julian said simply. I think I have been since that first meeting in your apartment, when you talked about wanting to matter in the way those nurses mattered to you as a child. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met, Simone. You make me want to be better, do better. Simone felt tears spill down her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I didn't think I'd feel this way again after losing my dad, after everything that happened. But you've shown me that it's possible to heal and grow stronger. They kissed as the sun set behind them, Two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of trauma and built something beautiful together. Simone knew they still had challenges ahead, but she also knew they'd face them together. For the first time in years, she felt completely whole. Seeing real change happen gives us hope that speaking up matters. If you believe in standing up for what's right, subscribe to support more stories of courage and transformation. Drop a comment about a time someone stood up for you. 6 months into her new role as Director of Patient Safety and Nursing Advocacy, Simone had implemented programs that were getting national attention. She'd created a mentorship system pairing experienced nurses with new graduates, developed a rapid response team for addressing workplace concerns, and launched a speaker series bringing in experts on healthcare culture. Metropolitan General Hospital had become a model for other institutions. Simone received invitations to speak at medical conferences and consulting requests from hospitals across the country. She was making a real difference, not just at her own hospital but in healthcare more broadly. Julian watched Simone's career flourish with pride and joy. Their relationship had grown stronger as they supported each other through the demands of their respective roles. They'd moved in together 3 months ago, finding a beautiful apartment with space for Simone's photography and a home office where they could both work when needed. One Saturday morning, Julian woke Simone early with coffee and breakfast in bed. "I have a surprise for you," he said, grinning mysteriously. "What kind of surprise?" Simone asked, sitting up and accepting the coffee gratefully. "The kind where you need to get dressed and come with me," Julian said. "Wear something nice." An hour later, they pulled up to Metropolitan General Hospital. Simone gave Julian a confused look. "We're spending our Saturday off at work." "Trust me," Julian said, taking her hand as they walked through the main entrance. He led her to the new wing, the one her father's foundation had funded. They'd expanded it recently, adding more cardiac care facilities and state-of-the-art equipment. But when Julian pushed open a door to a large conference room, Simone gasped. The room was filled with people. Andre was there, along with several board members, hospital staff, and representatives from the Johnson Foundation. A large banner hung on the back wall, the Theodore Johnson Nursing Excellence Program. Helen Rodriguez stepped forward. "Simone, we wanted to honor your father's legacy and your contributions to nursing. The board has voted to establish a nursing scholarship and professional development program in your father's name. The Johnson Foundation has agreed to fund it, and you'll serve as the program director." Simone's hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Julian wrapped his arm around her shoulders, supporting her as she processed this news. "It will provide full scholarships to 20 nursing students each year," Helen continued. "Plus ongoing professional development for current nurses who want to advance their education or specialize in patient safety. We hope to create the next generation of nurses who will follow your example of putting patients first." Andre came forward and hugged his sister. "Dad would be so proud of you," he whispered. This is exactly what he would have wanted. Simone could barely speak. This was more than she'd ever imagined, a way to honor her father while helping countless nurses pursue their dreams. "Thank you," she managed. "I'm honored. I accept this with gratitude." The celebration lasted for hours. Simone met the first scholarship recipients, bright-eyed students excited about nursing careers. She talked with current nurses who were thrilled about the professional development opportunities. Everyone shared stories about how the culture at Metropolitan General had changed, how they felt valued and supported in ways they'd never experienced before. As the event wound down, Julian pulled Simone aside to a quiet corner of the room. "There's one more thing," he said, looking nervous. "I don't think I can handle any more surprises today," Simone said with a laugh. Julian smiled, but his hands were shaking slightly. "This one's personal." He took both of Simone's hands in his. "When I met you, I was just trying to do my job, trying to fix a terrible situation. I had no idea I was meeting the person who would change my entire life." Simone's heart began to race as Julian dropped to one knee. "Simone Johnson, you are the strongest, most compassionate, most incredible person I've ever known. You've taught me what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. You've shown me that love can heal wounds I didn't even know I had. I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams, celebrating your victories, and building a future together. He pulled out a ring box and opened it to reveal a beautiful diamond ring with a simple, elegant setting. "Will you marry me?" Simone didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Julian slipped the ring on her finger and stood to kiss her. Behind them, applause erupted as everyone in the room realized what had just happened. Andre was cheering the loudest, his eyes wet with happy tears. The rest of the day passed in a joyful blur. Simone called friends and family to share the news. Julian's colleagues from the hospital administration congratulated them both. Helen Rodriguez pulled Simone aside to tell her that the board had already approved Julian's request to get married, ensuring there would be no conflict of interest concerns about their relationship. That evening, back at their apartment, Simone and Julian sat on the sofa, her head on his shoulder, both of them marveling at how much had changed in less than a year. "I can't believe this is my life," Simone said softly. "A year ago, I was standing in that emergency room, humiliated and hurt. I couldn't have imagined then that I'd end up here, doing work I love with the man I love. That terrible moment led to all of this," Julian said, kissing the top of her head. "It doesn't make what happened okay, but maybe it gave us both the push we needed to create something better." "To create something better together," Simone corrected. She looked at her engagement ring, then up at Julian. "When should we get married?" "Whenever you want," Julian said. "Though I have one request." "What's that?" "Let's have the wedding at the hospital," Julian said. "In the garden on the rooftop, right next to your father's wing. It feels right, bringing everything full circle." Simone smiled. "That's perfect. Absolutely perfect." They spent the rest of the evening making plans and dreaming about their future. They talked about expanding the nursing program, about maybe starting a family someday, about all the ways they could continue making healthcare better together. As Simone fell asleep that night, engaged to the love of her life and surrounded by meaningful work, she felt grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones. Sometimes, she thought, the worst moments in our lives lead to the best chapters. You just have to be brave enough to keep turning the pages. The months leading up to the wedding were busy but joyful. Simone and Julian decided on a summer ceremony, giving them 4 months to plan. They kept things relatively simple, focusing on what mattered most, celebrating their love with the people who'd supported them through everything. The nursing scholarship program officially launched, with the first cohort of students beginning their studies. Simone met with each scholarship recipient personally, offering mentorship and guidance. Several of them told her that her story had inspired them to pursue nursing despite obstacles in their own lives. Metropolitan General Hospital's transformation continued. Staff turnover dropped significantly, patient satisfaction scores reached all-time highs, and the hospital was featured in healthcare journals as an example of how to create a positive work culture. Other hospitals sent representatives to study their programs and policies. One afternoon in early spring, Simone's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Simone Johnson?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Nathan Pierce." Simone's breath caught. She hadn't heard from or about Dr. Pierce since his termination. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold. "I want to apologize," Dr. Pierce said. He sounded different, humbler, tired. "I know an apology doesn't change what I did. It doesn't undo the pain I caused you. But I need you to know that I'm deeply sorry. What I did was wrong, inexcusable. I've spent the past year in therapy, working on anger management and understanding why I behaved the way I did. It's no excuse, but I'm trying to be better." Simone was silent, processing this unexpected call. "I'm working at a small community clinic now," Dr. Pierce continued. "Making a fraction of what I used to earn, but doing work that actually matters. Treating patients who have nowhere else to go. I'm learning humility. I'm learning to listen to my team instead of dominating them. I heard about the changes you've made at Metropolitan General, about the nursing program. You took something terrible and created something beautiful. That takes a kind of strength I'm only beginning to understand. Why are you telling me this?" Simone asked. "Because you deserve to know that there were real consequences for my actions," Dr. Pierce said. And real change. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that what you did that day, standing up for your patient, it mattered. It changed more than just hospital policy. It changed me. After the call ended, Simone sat quietly, processing the conversation. She wasn't sure how she felt. Part of her was still angry at Dr. Pierce, probably always would be. But another part felt a strange sense of closure. He'd faced consequences, learned from his mistakes, and was trying to do better. That was all anyone could ask. She told Julian about the call that evening. He listened carefully, then asked, "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know," Simone admitted. "I'm glad he's changed. I'm glad he's helping people instead of hurting them. But I'm also glad I don't have to work with him ever again." Julian pulled her close. "That's fair. You don't owe him anything, including forgiveness. But if knowing he's changed gives you any peace, that's okay too." As their wedding day approached, Simone found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The assault had been traumatic, but it had also revealed who she really was, someone who wouldn't back down when patient safety was at stake, someone who could transform pain into purpose. It had brought her and Julian together, two people committed to making healthcare better. The hospital's rooftop garden was transformed for the wedding. White flowers and soft lighting created a romantic atmosphere. The ceremony would take place at sunset, with the city skyline as a backdrop and her father's wing visible just behind the wedding party. The night before the wedding, Simone's apartment was filled with her closest friends for an impromptu gathering. Rachel and several other nurses from the hospital came by, bringing champagne and stories. They reminisced about Simone's early days at Metropolitan General, laughed about terrible shifts and difficult patients, and toasted to her future. "You've changed all our lives," Rachel said, raising her glass. "Not just by improving policies, but by showing us what it means to have courage. Every time I speak up now about a patient concern, I think about you standing up to Dr. Pierce. You made us all braver." The women around the room nodded, and Simone felt tears welling up. "You all made me braver too," she said. "The support you showed me after what happened, that's what got me through. We take care of each other. That's what nursing is really about." After everyone left, Simone stood on her balcony, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow she would marry Julian Matthews, the man who'd stood up for her when she needed an ally, who'd loved her through the healing process, who'd supported her dreams while pursuing his own. Her father couldn't be there to walk her down the aisle, but she felt his presence anyway, felt his pride in the woman she'd become and the work she was doing. She thought about all the nurses who'd come before her, who'd fought for respect and recognition in a profession often undervalued. She thought about the students in the scholarship program, just beginning their journeys. She thought about patients she'd cared for over the years, the lives she'd touched in small but meaningful ways. Most of all, she thought about that terrible night in the emergency room, standing at the nurse's station with a red handprint on her cheek, trying to decide whether to fight or flee. She'd chosen to fight, not with anger or revenge, but with determination to create change. That decision had led to everything good that followed. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new chapter, but tonight, Simone gave thanks for all the chapters that had come before. The painful ones, the triumphant ones, and everything in between. They'd all brought her exactly where she was supposed to be. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with perfect summer weather. Simone woke in her childhood bedroom at Andre's house, where she'd spent the night before the ceremony. Her brother knocked softly and entered with coffee and a knowing smile. "Big day," Andre said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Happy," Simone said simply. "Really, truly happy." Andre handed her an envelope. "Dad left this for you, to be opened on your wedding day. Mom kept it with her important papers, and I found it after she passed." With trembling hands, Simone opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in her father's handwriting, dated just months before his death. "My dearest Simone," it read. "If you're reading this, it means you've found someone to share your life with. I'm so happy for you, even though I wish I could be there to see it. I've always been proud of you, not because of grades or achievements, but because of who you are. You have your mother's compassionate heart and her fierce determination. Whatever path you've chosen, I know you're making the world better just by being in it. Love fully, fight for what matters, and never forget that you deserve all the happiness life can offer. I love you forever, Dad. Simone cried, and Andre held her while she processed the gift of her father's words. When she finally composed herself, she tucked the letter carefully into her wedding preparations, a piece of her father to carry with her. Hours later, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Simone stood at the entrance to the rooftop garden with Andre by her side. Through the doorway, she could see rows of chairs filled with hospital staff, friends, family, and the nursing students from the scholarship program. Julian stood at the altar, handsome in his suit, his eyes scanning the crowd nervously as he waited for her. The music started, and Simone took a deep breath. "Ready?" Andre asked. "More than ready," Simone replied. As she walked down the aisle on her brother's arm, Simone saw the faces of people who'd become family over the past year. Rachel dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Helen Rodriguez smiled warmly. The nursing students beamed with excitement. Every person in that garden represented a connection forged through shared purpose and genuine care. Then her eyes found Julian's, and everything else faded away. He looked at her with such love and wonder that Simone's heart felt like it might burst. This was the man who'd believed in her, fought for her, loved her through every challenge. This was her partner in every sense of the word. The ceremony was beautiful and personal. They'd written their own vows, promising not just to love each other but to continue working together to make healthcare better. Julian's voice cracked with emotion as he spoke about how Simone had transformed his life. Simone promised to stand by him through every challenge, to build a future based on shared values and mutual respect. When the officiant pronounced them married, Julian kissed Simone with such joy that their guests erupted in cheers and applause. As they turned to face their community, hands clasped, Simone felt a profound sense of rightness. This was exactly where she was meant to be. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Andre spoke about his sister's courage and determination, making everyone laugh with stories from their childhood. Helen Rodriguez announced that the hospital board had voted to make the rooftop garden a permanent space for staff events, naming it the Johnson Matthews Reflection Garden in honor of Simone's father and the couple's work together. But the biggest surprise came at the end of the evening. Julian and Simone stood together to make an announcement. "We wanted to share something with all of you," Julian said, his arm around Simone's waist. "As you know, the Theodore Johnson Nursing Excellence Program has been incredibly successful. But Simone and I have been thinking about how to expand its impact." Simone continued, "The Johnson Foundation has agreed to fund similar programs at 10 additional hospitals across the country. We're going to help create cultures of safety and respect in healthcare institutions everywhere. Julian and I will be leading this initiative together, traveling to hospitals, training administrators and staff, and ensuring that what happened to me never happens to another nurse." The announcement was met with thunderous applause. Several nursing students rushed forward to hug Simone, thanking her for creating opportunities not just for them but for future generations of healthcare workers. As the evening wound down, Simone and Julian stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out at the city lights and the wing that bore her father's name. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Simone asked softly. "I can believe it because I've seen your strength every day," Julian replied. "A year ago, you were assaulted for doing the right thing. Today, you're launching a national program that will protect thousands of healthcare workers and improve patient care at hospitals across the country. That's not luck. That's you refusing to let a terrible moment define you." Simone leaned into him, feeling safe and loved. "We did this together. I couldn't have done any of it without you. That's what marriage is," Julian said, kissing her forehead. "Facing challenges together, building something bigger than either of us could create alone." They stood there for a while longer, savoring the moment. Behind them, the party continued, filled with people they loved and respected. Ahead of them lay years of meaningful work, of expanding their mission, of making healthcare safer and more equitable. The next morning, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Simone received an email from one of the nursing students in the scholarship program. The young woman wrote about how Simone's story had inspired her to become a nurse despite facing financial hardship and family doubts. She thanked Simone for creating a path forward and promised to honor that gift by becoming the kind of nurse who always puts patients first. Simone showed the email to Julian, and they both teared up. This was why their work mattered. Not just the policies and programs, but the individual lives touched, the dreams made possible, the culture slowly shifting toward compassion and respect. As they drove to the airport, Simone thought about Dr. Pierce working at his community clinic, about the nurses who felt empowered to speak up, about the students who would carry forward the values of patient-centered care. She thought about her father and the legacy he'd left, now expanded through the nursing program. She thought about her mother, who'd been cared for with such dignity in her final days. Most of all, she thought about that moment in the emergency room, standing her ground when it would have been easier to back down. That single act of courage had rippled outward, creating waves of change that were still spreading. It had brought her Julian, had given her a platform to transform healthcare, had turned pain into purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, glancing over at her. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am," Simone said. "For everything. The good parts and even the hard parts, because they all led here." Julian reached over and squeezed her hand. "Here's to new beginnings," he said. "To new beginnings," Simone agreed. "And to never forgetting where we came from." As they flew toward their honeymoon destination, Simone looked out the window at the clouds below and allowed herself to simply be happy. She'd fought her battles, created meaningful change, and found love in the process. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities and challenges and opportunities to make a difference. She was ready for all of it.